So, Diana, Kate.
Christine,
Diana.
Kate, Diana, Christine.
do you remember the first time you stepped out of your comfort zone?
I have two brothers, one on each side, right? So I remember the first time I came in crying. My dad said, "What happened?" And I said, "I got pushed down. We were playing stickball." And he said, "Get your ass back out there and show them who's tough." And that was a big moment for me that I still remember, I'm almost 50, how many years later that I did. I walked back out there and got back up and said, "I'm playing just as hard as you and let's go." And I think that is a through line for my entire life.
This is From the Ground Up. I'm Inc. Executive Editor Diana Ransom.
And I'm Editor-at-Large Christine Lagorio-Chafkin. Today's episode, Creating Your Own Category.
Hey everyone, Christine and I are back with our special guest host, Kate Luzio, who's the CEO and founder of Luminary.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Kate. Good to see you again.
So Kate, I'm seeing you and your hair looks fantastic.
Thank you.
What kind of
Very
products do you
dirty.
use? It's very dirty?
Very dirty.
Is that like the dry shampoo? Just
No,
dirty?
I can't use dry shampoo.
Just dirty? Okay.
It is not good for my hair, but I have found that my hair is quite long and takes a long time to do, so I just let it be dirty, and that's fine. Looks better sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you're doing works.
Thank you.
But yeah, no, so we're talking about hair products, we're talking about beauty products. The entrepreneur we're talking to today is Babba Rivera. She's the founder of Ceremonia. It's sort of a new company, and she's mainly focused on hair care products that cater to a Hispanic or Latina population. And it's kind of revolutionary in the sense that there weren't really products for this community before she got started. I mean, they existed, but they weren't necessarily household names.
So I love Babba. We had Babba speak at Luminary when she was just launching Ceremonia.
Cool.
And just seeing what she did prior, right, running her own agency, et cetera, to saying this is a real problem given she didn't see anything in the market for her. And so I love what she's built. And I think it's not only a product for the Latina Hispanic population. I think it now goes to all hair. I mean, I use it, what she is building and continues to build. Plus, she's attracted a great deal of funding in order to build this, which I think is also historic.
Well, and she definitely talks about that. She talks about how one of the investors she ended up talking to along the way tried to give her advice on how and when to raise her family. Meanwhile, she's actually pregnant.
Wow.
I mean, it was like a earth-shattering moment. I can only imagine what it must
And
be
I'm
like
sure
to be
that
her.
investor didn't look like her.
So Babba and I began by talking about her background and where the seeds for Ceremonia took root.
Ceremonia is a clean hair wellness brand that is very proudly rooted in my Latin heritage.
Your background is interesting. You're Chilean and you also grew up in Sweden. Is Ceremonia sort of a product of your own upbringing and heritage?
Very much so. I grew up in a very Hispanic household, but in Sweden, which I think culturally could not be more different from Latin culture. And my parents moved to Sweden more so out of necessity than anything else. I think sometimes people assume that, like how nice that they moved to Sweden, and they think they moved maybe for jobs or something like that. And it could not be further from the truth.
What was happening?
So there was the dictatorship in Chile that prompted the move, and my parents didn't pick Sweden by any means. Like they just ended up there. They were accepting political refugees at the time, and Sweden was a pretty tough landing, I would say, for my parents culturally. But
What did they do for work when they got there?
So my mom, none of my parents have like a degree. So my dad had a bunch of jobs. He was a hairdresser back in Chile. So a little bit of a full circle moment for me to have a hair brand now. He also would do electrician work and plumbing or whatever like he could do to make ends meet. And my mom, she had my brother really young. So she was home. And then when they moved to Sweden, my mom would do some cleaning jobs here and there. But even that was hard for her to get because of the language barrier.
And then what was it like for you growing up in Sweden? Did you feel like any kind of tug and pull in terms of your own heritage?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. I think it was interesting because on one hand, at home, I had one set of values and, learned about how to be as a human being. And then in school, I was learning something different. So, and that's what I mean about Swedish culture being so different from Chilean culture. Swedish culture is a little bit more about the individual, whereas Latin culture is more about the collective. And in Sweden, I was also in school celebrated for being an independent thinker and sort of like questioning the norm. And if you question the teacher, that's a good thing because it means you're an independent thinker. But in my household, questioning adults was considered rude. So it was just like this very interesting like dynamic, I think, as a child trying to figure out what's right and wrong and like how to operate in this world because I was being fed very different messages.
Right. Well, so flash forward, I guess, when you got to the United States is also very independent in terms of praising that. Did you feel like there was culture shock here for you at all?
No, actually, I came to New York, right, which is maybe not
not exactly
America.
America.
New York is a thing of its own. But coming to New York was a homecoming for me. I think it was the first time that I actually really felt like all of the different pieces that make up me were celebrated and probably stepped into my full self upon arriving here.
Cool. And what made you think Ceremonia was the right kind of company to start? At the moment you started, it was like 2020, right?
Yeah. So I launched it 2020. I was working on it for a little bit over a year before. So there were two driving forces. On one hand, it was just a personal need. I spent over a decade frantically damaging my hair, which I think a lot of women can relate to. But I grew up in the era of like your hair needing to be super straight, ideally not black. So I bleached my hair. I was straightening it on a daily basis and putting all these like really toxic products that were promising me to tame my hair and to make it shiny and smooth. And the only thing that happened was that these were all Band-Aid solutions. And over time, my hair just got so damaged, frizzier than ever, and I just started to hate it even more. So I would basically wake up an hour earlier every day just to style my hair.
Just to do your hair. That's
like,
wild.
That's wild. Imagine what you can do with all those hours.
You're just putting chemicals on it like daily.
So it's like you're waking up 1 hour earlier to just do something bad for yourself.
Right.
Like that's terrible, right? So I wanted to break free from that vicious cycle. I think as I was growing into, my adult self, I was just questioning that behavior. And I had simultaneously done a very interesting journey with my skin where I used to feel the need to wear a lot of makeup, and then I had embarked on a clean skincare regimen and actually used a lot of the products from a fellow Latina brand called Tata Harper. And I was really inspired by how I was able to transform my skin when I eliminated all of these toxic ingredients, and I basically unlocked real glow. And when you have real glow, you don't want to cover it up with makeup. So I remember thinking to myself, imagine if I could do that same journey with my hair. Like, what if I would just like unlock my best natural hair and I would just like wash it and let it air dry? What a concept. I mean, the other driving force here, truthfully, was also just realizing what a lack of representation the beauty industry has. And it was interesting because 2019, conversations about diversity were definitely happening, but for some reason, Latin representation was oftentimes overlooked in those conversations.
Which is wild in the United States.
Yeah, we account for 20% of the population. I also read that we're expected to reach 30% by 2060.
Wow.
So, like, the future really is Latinx. Like, whether you want to believe it or not, like, those are just the facts. And that was the driving force for me in wanting to create something that was rooted in Latin culture, because I realized that for the longest time, I had been neglecting my own relationship to my own heritage, and I wasn't carrying my culture with pride. And I realized that that was a result of just not having enough representation in an aspirational way. The only times I would see Hispanic representation was in a quite a like dystopian way. Like in Hollywood, it equals being a drug dealer or a maid or,
Right.
So like that's not real representation. So I wanted to create a brand that really would put Latin culture on the world map and that would sort of like load Latinidad with positive attributes. And I'm very inspired by French beauty. They have really mastered to make French culture feel aspirational. And I've been buying French beauty my entire life, and I'm not French, right? And somehow that felt like a luxury thing. I want to create the same thing with Latin culture, where I want not only Latin people, but non-Latin people to start aspiring to be part of this world.
Do you feel like you've already kind of transcended how much of your customer base ends up being Latinx versus not?
So that's actually what's fascinating is that we're 4.5 years in, and about half of our customer demo identifies as Latinx and the other half don't. And the other half, like the power user of Ceremonia, who is not Hispanic, is actually like a pretty traditional like white woman who is just very conscious. It's almost like the Goop customer, like someone who's just like extremely conscious. We do really well at this French retailer called Oh My Cream. They have a super high bar for what they consider to be clean. And we learned that our customer is extremely savvy and they read ingredients and they are very conscious consumers. They want to use sustainable things. They want to use things that are safe for them. So I would say that that's like really like the core of our business is the level of clean that we offer and the wellness approach to hair. And then because of our Latin heritage in the brand, we also very naturally appeal to the Latin demographic as well.
Right. But you're also using raw materials that are more akin to like Latin heritage or Hispanic heritage, right?
Yeah, so our key ingredients most of them are derived from Latin America. So guava is a big ingredient for us.
I noticed you have a guava candle too,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
I mean, we're obsessed with all things guava, and so is our customer. Our guava collection has like a more tropical scent too, and one of the most common questions I get is like, will you please make a guava fragrance? So there is something I think about just like this transportive element of using very tropical ingredients that really have the power to transport you mentally.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Back to your background a little bit for a second here. You started your career at Uber, right?
Yes.
So you're working at Uber in Stockholm, and then you ended up as the director of marketing at Away in New York City. And then you also started up your own marketing agency called By Babba. This is all before you launched Ceremonia. So you have like an incredible resume even before you launched a company. How was that helpful? How was having all these other varied experiences helpful for when you wanted to start Ceremonia?
I deem them very, very helpful. I am very glad that Ceremonia was not my first endeavor because there is just something about learning how to work. Like my husband and I talk about this a lot. To learn how to work is a skill. And I'm so happy I had, my quote unquote dog years in my 20s of just working around the clock and what I did not have an experience, I put in hours.
Yeah. Gosh, Uber, sweatshop.
I mean,
Jeez.
I worked very hard at Uber, but I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. I loved my experience at Uber. I'm grateful for it. It felt like getting paid to do a business school, basically.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was
That's
a
the
really
best.
cool experience. Did I have work-life balance? No. But did I need that in my early 20s? No. Like I was hungry to learn. I just wanted to do. I wanted to grow. So that experience was super valuable. And I think the experience that I don't have, right, is beauty. Like if you think about it, my background is in tech, basically.
Yeah.
So that was, I think, the scary part of entering a category that I technically did not have experience in. But I think that also has been my advantage is that I've had a fresh perspective to it. I'm not married to old ways of doing things. I'm really looking to innovate because I'm not confined by the way it should be.
So how did you gain that knowledge, though? I mean, obviously you have perspective and you're coming into it as an outsider, but like, did you hire people who knew something about the beauty industry?
Yeah, I think obviously you can always hire for the things that you don't know, but I think that as a founder, you have to understand, like, I think the core of your business at the end of the day. So I'm super close to product. We are a product business, and I think it would be crazy if I didn't understand, like, the fundamentals of, the creation of our product. That's the DNA. I do some angel investing too, and whenever I see a tech company that is founded by people who don't understand the tech, then that's a red flag because you can't outsource the core of the business. So for me, it was a lot about truly just like self-taught, like studying it on my own, while also doing knowledge exchanges. So I actually, in the early days, I had this other founder who he kept reaching out to my agency because he didn't know much about branding or marketing, and he really needed help there, but he couldn't really afford my agency services. And as I started to think about building a beauty brand, I was like, I have an idea for you. How about we do this like exchange where I help you with all things marketing and brand, and you help me with all things.
Oh, this is brilliant.
Yeah, like chemical engineering.
Yeah.
So we literally had like 3-hour lunches, and he also connected me to our first chemical engineer.
Cool.
He explained like how you work with labs, and if you want to do formulations in-house, what you need to think about. And it was just like so eye-opening, and I hope I helped him equally much. I think that's something that I always recommend founders is that there are people that are, amazing at what you're looking for, and don't underestimate your own genius. Like you have something that someone else needs, and help each other.
Yeah. And super smart, especially when you're trying to stay scrappy when you're starting
Like
a
I couldn't
company.
afford a consultant at the time, So it was like I needed to just do
when
this.
you can't hire,
Yeah.
try to use your resources smartly. But you did manage to raise funding, right? So Ceremonia has about 13 million in venture funding?
10
million,
Yeah.
okay.
So we actually raised $1 million pre-launch, which in today's day and age is like what?
As a Latina founder, too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. When you add the Latina founder element to it, it's just very depressing. I think, women in
I don't
general.
wanna, we don't need to go there.
Exactly. But just like it's good for people to be aware. Like Latina women actually receive like the smallest part of the pie when it comes to funding.
But it's also among the biggest groups that are sort of growing into entrepreneurship.
I know. So there is a huge discrepancy there because it means that it's not for lack of participation. It's just for lack of opportunity. So we raised 1 million pre-launch. It was a pre-seed. It was led by Sogal Ventures. They have been with the company ever since.
They're super fans.
Yeah, they're on the board. It's just been amazing working with women, and they know what it takes to be an early stage business because they have seen that movie many times. They invest early stage. They invest in diverse founders. Honestly, I was just lucky that I met them at the time.
I don't know. I mean, you have a lot of operational experience, and that must have helped you.
Yeah, actually, I got an introduction to them from one of my early clients at By Babba, actually, now that I think about it. So yeah, one of my first clients when I was running my brand marketing agency was Ade, the athleisure brand.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Nina, the founder there, she works a lot with the Sogal team. And then when I told her I was starting Ceremonia, she's like, can I please introduce you to Sogal? This will be right up their alley. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Sounds great. And then subsequently raised another 10 million?
Yeah, so we did a 10 million Series A,
yeah.
and that's been our journey.
But while you were doing this, while you're having these meetings with venture capitalists, you were also pregnant.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I've been pregnant basically for 4 years.
Yeah. I have not been in your shoes necessarily, but I do have children who are like 17, 18 months apart. So I do remember what it's like to like not have any gap and not have any break. So, I mean, I can't imagine doing it in your scale. So you have 4 children, but at this point you're raising money. You have to have a conversation with them about like, hey, guess what? I'm pregnant. Did you have that conversation and what was that like?
Yeah, I would say that it was so hard with my first pregnancy because I think also I was just myself navigating a lot of fears. I didn't know what motherhood was going to mean to me. And all I was fed was basically that motherhood equaled like not being able to be a business professional. Like it was sort of like this very binary.
Yeah. You have to stop your career.
Exactly.
You have to halt everything.
And all my Swedish friends, they go on 1-year maternity leave, right? So like that was also an expectation. And then the other extreme was, American hustle culture where you don't get any time off and you just like shovel your kid out to like daycare when they're 6 weeks old. And I mean, one thing actually that I realized recently is that you're not even allowed to adopt a dog until they're 8 weeks old because they need to be with their mom. But in America, you can send your 6-week-old baby to daycare, just to put in perspective. But anyways, I was fed these very binary, experiences. So I didn't know what to expect and I was super nervous. And I remember calling up every single investor to tell them the, in my mind, bad news. That I was pregnant.
Oh, no.
And which is so sad. Like, it's the most amazing news, right?
Yeah.
But who actually really flipped the script for me was Anu at Female Founders Fund.
Yeah. Anu Duggal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I remember I texted her. I was like, Anu, I have to talk to you. Like, do you have a few minutes? And she's like, yeah, of course.
She's like, are you dying?
Exactly.
What's going on?
Because she had just invested. And then she's like, hi, what's up? And I was like, okay, so I want to tell you that, I'm expecting. She's like, oh my God, so exciting. Congrats. Wow. When are you due? And I was like, da, da, da. And she's like, okay, cool. So what did you want to talk about?
Moving right along. Yeah.
And I was like, no, that was the thing. She's like, Babba. She's like, have you seen our portfolio?
Yeah.
They're all moms.
Well, female founders ones. Okay, obviously.
Yeah,
right.
but I understood that there were female founders, but I don't think I fully connected that these were women who also had personal lives.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So she really flipped the script for me. And then I was definitely much more unapologetic about it the second time around. And I mean, now I have 4 kids, so.
Yeah. Now you're just like, whatever. I'm doing it.
I'm doing it. And I think I had to dismantle a lot of limiting beliefs for myself before getting to that point. But I realized that the reality, though, too, is that as a founder, and especially an early stage founder and a venture-backed business, there is no such thing as taking a year off. Like if you just raise money to see if this company can fly, there is no such thing as like raising money and then using that entire run rate to be home.
Right.
You know, like
you
it's just
have
like
to prove.
You have to prove your existence. That's the reality. Like it's so different running a startup or even just working at a startup than it is to work corporate because you're fighting for your actual existence.
Wow.
That's the definition of startups. Like there's no guarantee that the startup is going to be
I feel
around.
stressful just hearing you say that.
Yeah. In the moment
stressed.
I took in capital, I felt like I had an egg clock next to me. It's like, tick, tick, tick,
Oh, yeah.
because money
Do you still
will run
feel
out.
that?
Yeah, all the
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
I think I just learned to live with the stress.
Okay.
Hold on. Let's pause here for a moment. It really says something about American society and how we treat mothers that even when being surrounded by fellow female founders who were also moms, Babba felt like she had to be ashamed for wanting to grow both her family and her company.
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of empathy for her. I mean, I'm not starting a business, but I definitely am trying to balance a career and motherhood myself. So I feel like I've never been in her shoes exactly, but I definitely felt like I was in her shoes and can only imagine what it must be like to literally be pregnant or have children at home and trying to manage a company and fund it.
And I just think it's amazing that she stuck to her instincts. She knew what she wanted to build. She didn't let anyone tell her she couldn't build it. And what she's done and how she's done it is really admirable and I think puts her on a great trajectory, but also really is role modeling for other founders that can see her and know they can do it too.
She's stood up for herself in a way that I think entrepreneurs can learn a lot from her.
That's fantastic. What did you guys talk about next?
When we come back, Babba talks about a major milestone. You have experienced some considerable success, so kudos.
Thank you.
Flash forward, you're in around 500 Sephora stores now, the first Latinx hair care brand, right?
Yeah.
So congrats to that. And you also launched like a physical store in 2023. So what do you attribute that growth to?
Honestly, our community. I really feel it in my heart that we could not have gotten here without them. I feel very much the support from our community in the sense that our success is a shared success. It's meaningful because of the underrepresentation that we have all experienced. So when we entered Sephora and became the first Latina-founded hair brand to ever do so, our community showed up big. Like we had so much organic posting about it, community members like storming into Sephora doors with like Ceremonia tote bags. And it was just like that level of brand awareness would have been impossible for us to gain without the community.
Yeah. So why start a physical location? You have all the exposure to Sephoras around the country. Why do a physical store? What's the benefit there?
Yeah, so actually because of that, because at Sephora, we have a really hard time controlling the brand experience. It's a wild, wild west. You're competing with customers' attention for so many things. Your real estate is really, really limited. And when we launched at Sephora, we only had one shelf and we were at the bottom. Like literally we're on the floor.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, we're, the underdog. And we still are, by the way. Like we're still, proving ourselves out and you have to like fight for your very existence in this highly competitive space that is the beauty world. So I remember feeling like I don't want that to define my brand. And we are so community driven and we don't have a home for our community. Every time we want to gather them, we have to reinvent the wheel, recreate a space, brand it. And we were actually spending so much money in the end trying to create these experiences. So by having a physical space, we not only were able to really define our brand, but we're also able to create a home for our community, and we're able to do things consistently.
Yeah. So were you like renting out spaces to have
Yeah,
to
you
host
would do,
events?
like a buyout. You would take over a restaurant, or you would, rent out a space. And now our flagship, and it's perfectly on brand. We host press days there. We do photo shoots, interviews, community days, happy hours,
Cool.
press previews.
And did Her USA kind of prompt any of this desire to have a physical location? And what is Her USA? Or what was it?
Yeah, honestly, this was probably 10 years ago when I moved to New York. I launched a female network called Her. I was running the US chapter together with a co-founder. Her name is Marika. And my friend was running it in Europe. And it was really just a collective to get women together to help each other professionally. We felt like this was something that men were really good at. When they meet, they talk work and they share notes and they introduce each other to people. I remember when I met my husband.
Who, by the way, is also an entrepreneur.
Yes, and
Carl.
who sold his company and has been a great sort of like...
We've written about his company.
Oh, really?
Ticktail, yeah.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah, he's been a great inspiration for me too. I had basically a front row seat to his entire journey with Ticktail. And I remember that I would sit in on conversations with him and his friends, and the way they were helping each other was just so fascinating. And then I would sit with my girlfriends, and the conversations would be about completely different things. And then no one was even helping each other professionally. So I wanted to basically take a page from the men's book and apply that in my female sphere. And I am so glad I did. My entire network today somehow leads back to Her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. The reason I know so many founders today and even investors are because of the early days of Her. I really built my network through peers. And we were all just, in our early 20s at the time. I was marketing manager at Uber. Someone was a marketing manager at Sweetgreen. Someone was at Glossy or something. And then next thing you know, these people have become...
Right? They move on.
Yeah.
They rise up the career ladder
Totally.
and become super influential.
Yeah.
That's amazing to hear that. And so from that, you were standing up kind of events. These were networking events, and the whole idea of having a community has seemed to have followed you through your career too.
Yeah, I think that's just the way I grew up. Our little tiny apartment in, the projects of Sweden was the center point of my family's community. We would have my cousins over with their 4 kids in our 2-bedroom apartment, no questions asked. We would have salsa parties. Community is so ingrained in my blood. I don't know anything else. So I
What's
feel
a salsa party like? Does everybody bring their own salsa?
No, you dance salsa.
Oh, you dance?
Yes.
Oh, I'm very food oriented. Sorry.
I mean, same. I'm we should add that element though.
Yeah,
salsa dancing with...
You bring your own salsa and then we dance. That's...
New salsa
We're
party
gonna do
coming
it.
soon.
We're going to do it. So we talked about Carl for a minute, and you described what it's like to have had the front row seat to seeing his business. How hard is it to have 2 entrepreneurs in the family?
It is pretty hard. Luckily, he is an employee now.
Oh, right. He works at Shopify because
Yeah.
the company was acquired in 2018.
Yeah, so he sold his company to Shopify and then started working there. So I do appreciate that there is at least a little bit of stability in our household.
Health insurance.
Exactly.
is nice.
But for a while, we were, I was running by Bob and he was running Ticktail.
Oh, right.
And I'm glad we only had a dog to think about at the time and not 4 kids.
Yeah.
But having 2 professionals in general under the same roof with very demanding jobs, because even though he's an employee, he has a super demanding job. He has to travel. If something breaks at Shopify, he oversees such a big part of the company. He's always on call,
Right.
Yeah. So it just puts a lot of pressure on a system at home. So in many ways, I feel like this past year and this year will continue to be a period in our life of really setting the foundation for what it's like to be a family.
Yeah.
With 1 kid, you can just wing it. With 2 kids, you can almost wing it. But when you have 4 kids, you're running another company.
Wow.
It's like the Rivera Corp.
Yeah. This is like a conglomerate almost, too. And you're also renovating a home.
Yes.
This is its own headache, I'm sure. If you tack on Ceremonia being considered your fifth baby. So that's 5 under 5, if you were to think about this.
Yes.
It's kind of wild. So how do you manage it all? Like, what do you do to stay centered?
It sounds boring, and I never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but routines. I used to hate routines, and now I am a subscriber.
Yeah.
Routines is where it's at.
So what's your routine?
So the routine is, I don't think that the perfect balance exists on an everyday, every minute basis, but I do think that you can have it all, just not all at once. So I've really sort of like compartmentalized what I'm focused on right now. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to re-engage with other areas of myself at a later time. But right now, I'm really, really focused on family, work, and my health. And you really only get to pick 3. Like, that's just the reality of it. And then to even make room for those 3 things, you have to be super disciplined. So I'm really disciplined about how I spend my week. And I might not have a perfect work-life balance on a daily basis, but when I zoom out on a week basis, my goal is to be able to say that, yeah, that was a good week.
Yeah. How did you learn this rule of 3 that you're talking about?
I don't know. Maybe just like
Reading ink?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Wait, is that something that...
I mean,
yeah.
very possible.
Yeah.
Very possible.
No, but I feel like my husband and I always come back to that. Like, you only get to pick 3. Like, whenever we try to add a 4th or a 5th, things break. I don't make up the rules.
You're like, I've tried it. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we learn. So you also have an incredible following. I mean, I was just looking on social media for you. It's like 175,000 people follow you. I mean, you basically become kind of a fashion icon, but also people are interested in learning about you and your life. Does it ever feel like you're putting yourself out there and it's exhausting, like to have to put yourself out there like that? Or has it been helpful?
Yeah, honestly, this is a passion. It's really just coming from a place of joy. And I think that's why it flows so seamlessly. Like, it was never a goal of mine to like acquire followers or, like, but for some people it is like, I want to be famous or I want this or that was never like an end goal for me. This is more so a byproduct of me pursuing my passions and connecting with people. Again, community has always been super important. And being able to do so through my digital platform has been such a gift. And it's been extremely helpful in business. Like, I cannot underline that enough. It's helped me with product development. It helped me with retail relationships. Like, we get some retail partners because our followers will literally reach out to them and be like, why can't I buy Ceremonia here?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like it has an incredible power, but I only think it has that power if it's done from a place of authenticity.
Right. So you're being real with people. And
Yeah, like I obviously post a lot about Ceremonia, but if you look at my account, it's not I am the founder of Ceremonia and I only talk about products. Like, I give a lot of myself and my full self, and I do it because I enjoy it and I love to be an expander to people. I feel like I grew up with a lot of limiting beliefs. I did not have any role models in my household or in my near preview. All of my parents, friends were really struggling financially and emotionally, and I didn't have any expanders. So if I can play that role for someone today, that means a lot.
Right. And to some degree, what you're doing is offering representation, like showing a successful, Latina founder is showing other people who are just coming up that it can be done.
That
too.
it can be done.
Right.
Yeah. If you can see it, you can believe it. And it's such a cliche, but it really stands true.
Do you draw a line anywhere?
Yeah, I think I have an invisible line. Like my kids are in my content here and there, but they're not main characters, I'm not trying to make my kids famous. Like, that's not a purpose.
Right.
And I mean, it can be, right? Some people really want their kids to be a model or something like that. That's not an aspiration of mine. I prefer if they don't, but we do some shoots together where it feels like it's an opportunity to do something together that feels joyful. So it's a very fluid line, and I think that is very much a representation of how I live my life. I don't try to confine myself with too many rules. If it feels right, it probably is right. And if it doesn't feel right, it probably is not right.
Did you always want to be an entrepreneur?
No, I didn't even know what entrepreneurship was because it's not in my family, and risk-taking is also not something that was promoted in my family. My mom, all she could pray for was for me to one day hopefully get a full-time job.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe have health insurance. That would be great. And then I remember I got my first job, and I mean, it was, I think it was like a marketing coordinator or something, and I had paid vacation. Wow. And my mom was like, hold on to that job. Instead of being like, oh, amazing, like, how do you want to grow in your career? Like, what I'm trying to say is that I grew up from such a place of scarcity. So entrepreneurship was not even in this, in the vocabulary. It was a later realization. And in many ways, I actually think meeting my husband has expanded my preview a lot. And he also comes from a super humble beginning, but he had more of a risk-taking appetite.
Yeah. Do your parents still live in Sweden?
Yeah, they do.
And is Ceremonia carried anywhere in Sweden?
It is. And oh my gosh, you bet they are very proud. They cannot stop talking about it. I'm sure their friends are like, yes, we know.
That's so cute. I could just imagine your parents, like very proud parents, like going and taking pictures of all the displays.
I actually just had my mom here in New York, and I took her to Sephora yesterday because I had to see we have new end caps in some of the Sephora stores. And my mom, I had to drag her out of there. She was like talking to everyone in Spanish about the brand.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's so touching. Sorry, I have to ask you. So you were at the bottom of the shelf, and then how did you end up with end caps and all that?
Yeah. So, Sephora is a highly competitive space, very data-driven. But I will say that they are also mission-driven. And I think that they recognize that the new generation wants to see representation. So even if the sales data is not there to fully confirm that to be the case yet, they're willing to take some bets. And I see this across multiple categories. They have definitely taken a bet on us. I'm a small investor in Ami Collet, and they are also part of the makeup's next big thing, and they're Black-owned. And they're also part of the 15% pledge, which doesn't help us Latinx people, but it helps Black
speaks
founders.
To the mission.
Yeah, and like it
Sephora.
just speaks to the mission at large for Sephora. So I think what Ceremonia brings to Sephora is that we are truly the cleanest of hair care, and we are one of the very few brands that is rooted in culture. And the new generation is really, really craving culture. We see this across on TikTok, even like Diwali, I feel like was a huge thing this year, and Hispanic Heritage Month grows every year. So I think Sephora recognizes that the future of beauty is multicultural.
And they probably know that 30% of the population will be
Hispanic.
Latinx one day. And then your best advice for fellow female founders?
Focus on your strength and don't beat yourself up too much about your weaknesses. Early on, I learned, I think the old school leadership school was that you should make your weaknesses your strengths. And I don't think that's realistic. I think we can spend a whole lifetime trying to improve our weaknesses, and we obviously can, but it will be in incrementals.
Right.
But if we double down on our strength, we can have astronomical impact.
Right. No, that makes sense. You're wasting your time almost.
Yeah.
Trying to fix
And it doesn't
yourself.
mean that you shouldn't acknowledge and try to be better in the areas where you're not good. Like I work on my weaknesses too, but I don't think that's where I'm going to have the biggest impact.
Right. And in the end, you could also barter. Right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's the learning, right? Just do a knowledge exchange with someone.
Yeah, this is great. Well, Babba, thank you so much for your time, and I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you so much.
So after my conversation with Babba, I'm left with both admiration and curiosity. I'm curious where she'll go next, what are the new mountains she'll climb, and admiration in the sense that she stuck to her principles when it concerned her company and the brand she wanted to build. And also doing it all with 4 kids at home under the age of 5. Of course, it helps that she's been comfortable putting herself out there, but her persistence is what strikes me. That's a lesson for all of us.
That's all for this episode of From the Ground Up.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Also, if you like this episode or have suggestions on what topics you'd like to hear about, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or reach out to us on Inc.'s social channels.
From the Ground Up is produced by Avery Miles, Sam Gabauer, and Hawa Otori, with Diana Ransom and myself. Lead producer is Blake Odom. Editing by Matt Toder. Mix and sound design by Nicholas Torres. Our executive producer is Josh Christensen.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.